Hello, everyone. So, welcome to the Queerness Diaries. Today, I am joined by 𝐓𝐴𝐶. So, thank you so much joining me all the way from New Jersey today.
My pleasure, Connor. Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to get to know you and see where this partnership can go in the future. So thanks so much for
Yeah,
having me.
it's awesome to have you on. So, thanks so much for joining me. And I'm really excited today, as I was saying, to delve into your diary and hear, all your chapters that have led you to where you are today. And I think it'd be great for people to, hear your story. And we're going to go through all the experiences you've had along the way. And I always say it's great to sort of start with just an introduction about you, where people can find you on LinkedIn, and then we'll delve all the way to chapter one, so right to the beginning.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is 𝐓𝐴𝐶, as you had said. You and I had actually met, ironically enough, but nothing happens by accident, on LinkedIn. And I'm a big
Yeah.
proponent, clearly, of social media. So I run the Pride and Promotion podcast. You can find it on Spotify, YouTube, all the streaming services. And I also run j.Federico Marketing and Anchors to Dusk Publishing, which is a social media marketing company that runs organic social media for celebrities, startups, so forth and so on. And I'm also a big advocate for the queer community. So that's a little bit more about who I am and what my mission has become. So
Yeah, it's so awesome to have, these days with LinkedIn, how the communities evolve from the groups on there and all the connections that we've managed to make, and having these podcasts out there. I think even from 2, 3 years ago, how it's grown, and seeing just the network and how people are connecting. It's just been amazing to see, because I didn't even use LinkedIn that much until last year. But since
yes.
then, it's changed so much and grown, like month to month, just seeing, the LGBT networking group, especially. I think that's how we might have found each other. It just has
Yeah,
grown so much. And
absolutely. It's
hopefully
only
it
going to grow.
continues.
It's
Yeah.
exactly. It's only going to grow larger and become more prominent, in our society going forward,
Yeah, for
which is
sure.
amazing.
Yeah, it's so true, because we get to, meet people from all over. And I'm so excited today to sort of delve into your story and hear about your experiences. And what I thought we'd do, first of all, is to sort of go all the way back. So go back right the way to chapter one, and
Yeah.
to hear about what was life growing up for you, and sort of, yeah, those sort of early age stepping stones that sort of have shaped you into where you are today?
Yeah, that's a great question. Something that also my therapist started with me 3 years ago. Let's go back to the beginning and have a
Yeah.
conversation. And it's been very therapeutic. Of course, it's been very cathartic. It's been a journey, but full transparency, first and foremost, have had a very privileged life,
Yeah.
and I understand that. But I want everybody to understand that. And even though you may have a privileged life, things are not always that easy for you. I'm not trying to victimize myself. I'm just speaking how it is. So
Yeah.
I grew up in New Jersey. I've been in, the state of my entire life. I love the state. It's still
Yeah.
very safe for LGBT, members of the community, and even more so, today and hopefully going forward. So I grew up in a very Republican town, Ridgewood, New Jersey, and it was beautiful. I had everything I could have ever wanted. I was trained classically on trombone. I was
Yeah.
in the choir. I was in marching band. I had friends of all different shapes, colors, and sizes. But I
Yeah.
knew that I was special, but I knew that I was different because I knew that I had a secret.
Yeah.
And it wasn't easy to contain, to be told to be a certain way, to be a certain weight, to be a certain kind of person. Growing up, you have to like girls, and there
Mm.
was really no way out. Except, I mean, really back then, the birth of the internet, the birth of America Online, the
Yeah.
chat rooms, the instant messenger,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
that really shaped who I was, because I felt like, even though I was so privileged and I loved my life and I don't regret anything of how I grew up, because my
Yeah.
parents did try the best that they possibly could, but I was not myself until about 20, plus
Yeah.
years old. So 20 years of feeling oppressed, 20 years of not being myself.
Yeah.
How do you act? Is you fall in line. And but I will say, to the credit of the town in which I grew up, Ridgewood, New Jersey, has completely changed all these years later. 20
Yeah.
plus years later is now more accepting. They have pride flag raisings, and you can bring the same sex
Mm.
to prom, and
Yeah.
maybe that was part of that struggle back then, but it's part of the solution now. So
Yeah.
that's a little bit more about, my upbringing was not bad by any means, but it was a struggle. And
Yeah.
that's laid the foundation.
Yeah, I think what as well is very true for a lot of us is growing up, we didn't really have a lot of queer figures like on TV. And I mean, there was a few TV shows, but it was sort of at the time when the internet was exploding and MySpace and everything else and discovering ourselves. But at the same time, there weren't many figures to really look up to. The way, I mean, even now, there's still not enough on TV. It's come a long
No.
way, but growing up, it definitely made it a lot more, when you felt, I say different, but you know what I mean? Like with the feeling of our sexuality, like there was no sort of guidebook. There was not the open conversations. The shows we see now, like Heartstopper on TV, for
Yes.
example, when you're at that age. So there is a lot of, or there was a lot of fear, I think, for a lot of us with coming out and approaching it. And even if, we felt with family that it would be fine, there was still that element of, oh, this could go either way.
Yes. Yes. I mean, even I remember watching skits even on Saturday Night Live back in the, early to mid
Yeah.
90s. And because of what I've heard from family members, not at me directly, just at things like, watch out for your son because the gays essentially might be after him. What is
Yeah.
somebody supposed to think? Not even just for myself. I'm sure many of
Yeah.
us had unfortunately same experiences or similar, things happen to them. So when I would watch television shows that clearly had gay characters or made fun of people of the then, queer community,
Yeah.
I felt embarrassed. Like I couldn't be watching. I was doing something wrong or incorrect. And
Yeah.
I know that's changed for the most part with, the younger generations today, hopefully beyond.
Yeah.
But it was a difficult, like I almost wanted to change the channel and say, maybe I shouldn't be watching this, and
Yeah.
and feel embarrassed of what I was watching, even though it was not wrong by any means. So
Yeah, for sure. I think what happens as well is we build up almost like a sort of masking thing, these defense mechanisms with trying to appear a certain way for society not to face that judgment almost. And then a lot of our life, once we come out, is sort of peeling back the layers of the onion, I always say, to find out who we really are against the sort of versions of ourselves we've had to play almost, because it is
sure.
almost like I used to say, like back in my town growing up, I used to play maybe a different character in school when I started my first jobs, a different character there, and all these different versions of myself. And then finally, when you're sort of free and the mask is off, it's like, well, who am I? I have to now figure out the parts are there, but you once you peel back the layers, it's like sort of what you do with all these parts of yourself and figuring it out. I think that's a big part of our 20s as well, after we sort of unmask, sort of getting the pieces back together, which
Sure.
were there the whole time from the mess they are.
Yeah, even in your 30s, I mean, I speak from experience.
Yeah.
I had something which we can get into later, of course, if you would like, but I've had many things happen to me that have led me right to where we are today, where I am
Mm.
speaking with you today. And hopefully I keep saying beyond because I'm looking to the future, purposely
Yeah.
here in America for many reasons,
Yeah.
but for self-preservation and really for the future of our community. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And for you, how was the experience with coming out? Did you have a lot of anxiety approaching it? Was it something that you did kind of gradually? Like for me, I feel like I came out once at 25 and then that was the final time. But I
Yeah.
tried when I was 16, 17 to come out as bi. I was never bi. I was always fully fledged straight
Yes.
man. But I thought, at that age, it was 2007, 2008. I was trying, to, in my mind, soften the blow to my parents because I knew it wasn't going to be taken very well. And then once I was
Sure,
in Madrid and I felt like, well, I'm hundreds of miles away from home now, it's like they can take it or leave it. So,
sure.
how was the experience though for you when it came to coming out?
It wasn't great. Again, not to victimize myself, not to say it was shameful. Uh, it was hurtful, but I had a similar experience where I knew I liked members of the same sex, either a
Okay.
celebrity or somebody in my grade or my class. Um, and I actually liked a lot of different boys growing up, but not understanding what that meant until I got older and things
Yeah,
started to form in my body. That is the natural progression of
yeah,
aging and being a teenager and going through those emotions and changes. So coming out was very difficult. I did come out as bisexual in college first to my friends to
yeah,
soften the blow for myself because I
yeah,
didn't want to fully admit that I did like men and I was gay. I was queer, homosexual. Uh,
yeah.
I think a lot of us have also gone through that. Let's test the waters and see how it
Mm.
really is. I retracted that. I said it's only a phase. I like both men and women. I've been at that point both with men and women,
Yeah,
in that sense.
yeah,
And I said, you know what? Like maybe I really don't like men. It's not
yeah,
appropriate. Nobody really around me, I think, would understand back then. And I teetered, back and forth for a few years. Came out officially on my 21st birthday. Uh,
yeah.
and it wasn't great. I mean, even had my mother at the time say that she would leave my father if he didn't accept who I was. I mean, it was
Mm.
a lot of turmoil. Uh, and then just one day at a time, I guess, since then is to, as you had said, to peel back those layers and to understand who you really are and to find the most authentic, truthful parts of yourself and
Yeah, for
then put
sure.
the onion back together and say, this is who I am. You can take it or leave it. And I really couldn't care
Yeah.
less and just live your truth.
Yeah, I think for sure it's definitely a process when it comes to parents as well. Like I always like nowadays with my mom, for example, I can have the most open conversations about anything. But I remember even when like 25, 26, I had a boyfriend at the time in Madrid. I had so much fear of just saying, look, I have a partner now and so much fear when she came to visit me with my sister in Madrid of
Sure.
being judged and then another rejection, even though I'd sort of finally ripped the mask fully off because I'd felt so rejected at like 16, 17, and I sort of had gone back into the closet. I mean, my town, is pretty small town and
Sure.
it's about an hour and a half more or less to Manchester. So I used to get like I always say glimpses into the life I wanted if I go to Manchester or
Yeah.
Birmingham or London. And then I'd come back home, put on this sort of straight mask again. And I think as the years went on, it just became natural for me. But I built this sort of layer around me that meant when I finally got rid of that layer again at
Sure.
20, 25, it was like, oh crap, like now I'm being fully me. And if I get rejected again by, you know, family, it's going to be very difficult. But luckily, things went well. But I think
Sure.
we put so much pressure, on ourselves sometimes that it can give us a lot of anxiety. And half the stuff might not even be true, but sort of that imposter syndrome, sort of kicks
Yes.
in, doesn't it?
It's very much real, Connor. It's very
Yeah.
much real. But I wanted to also go back to my teen years just for a moment. In
Yeah.
growing up, again, I had a great life, great upbringing for the
Yeah.
most part. But there were a lot, and this was the mid '90s to the early 2000s, and in my area and the
Yeah.
surrounding towns in New Jersey, we know where I was. Very prominent area, mostly white, mostly Republican,
Yeah.
not very liberal, not very accepting. But the young men that were out at the time
Yeah.
were very outspoken, very outlandish, very against the grain. And in a
Yeah.
way, I wanted to be them. And I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
jealous of them having the conviction to really be themselves in
Yeah.
hindsight. But at the same time, they were seen, unfortunately, as the outcasts and
Yeah.
the jokers and the freaks.
Mhm.
And that's what also wanted me to distance myself from that, saying, I don't want to associate with these people because of the
Yeah.
fear and the internalized homophobia that I was feeling at the same time.
Yeah.
So that was also a struggle, to be perfectly honest. Yeah.
Yeah. I think as well, the sort of side of internalized homophobia takes a while to get past, when we grow up in an environment with sometimes there's a lot of toxic masculinity around and these sort of for me as well, when I was sort of finding myself, I had almost a fear of going to not just being like found out or whatever again by my parents,
Sure.
but a fear of going to like the gay bars into Manchester and that because I could see people that were 100% themselves, that
Yeah.
wore the fashion they want, they didn't care what people thought. And I
Right.
had this sort of admiration for them because I had built so many layers and I didn't know, for the longest time who I really was amongst that. And it took, I think it's when I finally arrived in Madrid and I could fully immerse myself into sort of the lifestyle there, it definitely changed. But that sort of period in the UK from like 16 to 25, I
Sure.
had a lot of admiration. And at the same time, I was like, I just don't fit into any sort of, group of people. And I'm like, I don't even know at this point what I even like anymore.
Yes. Or who to surround yourself with, or who to emulate, or who to trust. In
Yeah.
college, even for myself, while I was struggling, of course, leaning towards the homosexual tendencies and
Yeah.
testing the waters again, as I keep saying this to be inclusive, as I'm sure we all have at one point or another in our pasts, or those who are listening, even currently. It does get better. Just want to
Yeah.
let you know there's a finish line,
Yeah,
but
for
then you have to
sure.
evolve. There was a witch hunt essentially on my campus in Pennsylvania. I'm not going to say which campus. Again, I had a great experience in college,
Yeah.
but there was a witch hunt within the queer community of
Mhm.
trying to find newly outed young gay men and try to
Yeah.
bring them to come out in force. And I didn't appreciate that either. There was so much negativity around the queer community within the queer community, if that makes sense,
Yeah, for
back
sure.
then. And that was scary too. It wanted me to go back in the closet and say, this really isn't for me. I would rather not hook up with or visit any other male companions at the time, in
Yeah.
secret, because of the proverbial witch hunt. And that was very unique, which I
Mhm.
really wish that never happened, to be honest. So
Yeah, for sure. I think it brings a lot of stress, and even as a society now, with how people approach a lot of celebrities, there's still that feeling to assume someone's sexuality and have the right to know from a lot of
sure.
people when it's none of our business, but it's always sort of been there. When I think in the past, it's always a news story when a celebrity comes out. It's always something that everyone speculates on and even write down, to friend groups. I remember, in
Yeah.
school, I had seen horrific bullying from another gay guy in my classroom. So
Right.
if anyone sort of these bullies sort of perceived any remote attributes that were perceived in their mind as gay, then they sort of they bullied those people too. So it was very
Yeah.
difficult to manage that. And then college for me was very open. I think because I had, ironically, from my school, so there was another gay guy in my classroom. There was two of my best friends through school and college were lesbian, and then we sort of built this group through college. So even in this
Sure.
small town, which, I always say the only gay in the village here, we
Yeah.
sort of built this little community, which helped all of us to navigate it. But we still had elements of fear. And especially when you then go into the workplace with, I'm not sure how it was for you, but sort of the first jobs and often around environments again, where people will speculate, and it's, I always say, like, in the workplace, I used to keep my work life very much separate from my home life.
Hmm.
And especially
Right.
in my early 20s, like the thought of being, outed um, was something that I never wanted to happen, because I just had that experience, I guess, through school, of seeing how it had been,
Sure.
approached by a lot of people. And how was it sort of for you as you went into sort of your early days of work and approaching the sort
Yeah.
of feeling with, did you feel that you could be yourself in work, or did you sort of feel a little bit closed off?
I closed myself off purposely when I joined the
Yeah.
workforce, years ago. Again, not to combat the internalized homophobia, not out of fear, just because I was taught that work was work and play was play, and you kept
Yeah.
those lives separate. And I still hold that to be the truth to this day,
Yeah.
even though I work for myself now and run my own company, and all
Yeah.
bets are off. But back
Yeah.
then, I wasn't ostracized. However, people knew who I was when they hired me. Uh, I became more open with
Yeah.
my managers as time went on, as different roles had evolved and become more available to me. Uh, but ironically enough, I never had a problem, and luckily enough, in the country, never had a problem feeling like I was being ostracized or pointed out or even bullied or made fun of because of my orientation and sexuality at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's something, with the workplace. I always see a lot of people struggle with the anxiety of possibly being, outed, and struggling with finding that balance of, well, it's none of their business anyway. I'm just here in a professional capacity. But
Yeah.
at the same time, people nowadays, they get into anyone's social media, their LinkedIn, their Facebook, and nowadays, I just don't care. I mean, I can't really care now. My LinkedIn is just, with
Is
queer
zero to
banners and
60. It's a
everything. But
beautiful LinkedIn profile. Your content is so provocative and it's so professional and so inspiring. So it's not just for you, but it's nobody's business. And if people want
yeah.
to look at your Facebook or your TikTok or your LinkedIn or your Instagram or whatever, I have a few choice words for them. So come speak to me and I'll help, protect you against that. You and every member of the community if I possibly can, because it's nobody's business. It's nobody's
Yeah,
business.
it
Yeah.
is so true. I think, it is great though now that we have this platform where we can express ourselves how we want, and being able to reach that place as well, that you can do it. Because I know 5, 10 years ago, I would definitely was not in that sort of place. But I kind of want to go back to sort of so onto kind of your next chapter now, through
Yeah.
your 20s. How was your experience after you came out, going into your 20s, and I guess life after, uni, finding yourself? How was that sort of experience for you?
Yeah. It was liberating. Um, Still is,
Yeah.
20 plus, not to age myself. I look very good. Thank you very much. But uh exhilarating, scary, still trying to find my tribe, at that age.
Yeah.
I found my now partner going on 19 years in February, at a very
Oh,
early age,
nice.
22. Feels like we've been married. We are legally, I guess, under, uh, I forget what law it is in New Jersey, but if you're under the same roof for seven
Yeah.
plus years, like legally, you are, married by the law. We're
Yeah.
not, on paper. Uh, but that's unique too, finding my person that I keep coming back to time and again through
Yeah.
trials and tribulations of we've gone through so many iterations of ourselves and each other and
Yeah.
as a relationship, as individuals, and we still are to this day, which I
Yeah.
think says a lot, and I'm really proud of that we continue to choose each other no matter what we've been through. But in
Yeah.
your 20s, you don't know who the heck you are. You want to
Yeah.
go out
So
dancing,
true.
you want to be part of the hookup culture, you want to do so many things, and your hormones at that point still are raging, at least for young men. We're at
Yeah.
our peak essentially, at that age.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate that? But I also, you know, put myself through my last 2 years of college while working full time.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a lot of money, so
Mm.
on top of everything else, it was unique. It was feeling for the most part okay with myself, knowing that I wanted better for myself and my relationship and for my future. Because even to this day, I still want it all. And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
going after everything that I deserve and then some. And then
yeah,
to hopefully be a voice even more so for the community.
yeah,
So none of that was even on my mind though in my
mm,
20s.
yeah,
It
yeah,
was, I'm in love and let's just have fun and go partying and spend money. And
yeah,
not
yeah.
really caring about the community at that point, to be honest. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been there, done that. But I think that's such a great mindset though that you have because th these sort of memories that we have, I always think one day we can, look back at our lives and all the everything from the crazy nights to things that seem like just insignificant moments at the time
Yeah.
would be great things to look back as a sort of memory book. And I imagine, getting to build that with a partner that's seeing all the different iterations of you and how you've grown as a person,
Yeah.
like you'll be
Yeah.
able to, one day sort of sit down and be like, look at us when we were 23 wasted in that club. Like, look at us now.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're, I mean, especially partnered and I want to bring that to light for a moment. Again,
Yeah.
not to be negative, just explaining. I'm sure we've all experienced this one way
Mm.
or another. Even when I started dating my now partner, my future official husband, right?
Yeah.
I was getting a lot of flack from members of the community that were single in the clubs that I used to frequent. I used to
Yeah.
go out Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, dancing, clubbing, meeting people, not necessarily to hook up or to cause a ruckus, but
Yeah.
I really just, that was my freedom from my
Yeah.
home life, from even before I found my now partner of 19 years.
Yeah.
That was just to be part of the community, to be out, be proud, not worry, not look over my shoulder, not be embarrassed, and to combat my internalized homophobia, where I have seen scenes like
Mm.
Queer as Folk, both the UK
Yeah.
version and the American version back in the day, were very groundbreaking. And I wanted to be Justin. I wanted to be all the different characters, and I related to them. Very important,
Yeah.
but there was
Yeah.
not much on television
Mm.
at the time. You had to buy the DVDs, spend a lot of money you didn't have, or put on the credit card, and
Yeah.
hope for the best. And that's all we had to really look to. And I really wanted to emulate that because they were so exciting to me. And they had the
Yeah.
money and the friends and the drinks and the adult relationships, that I
Yeah. Yeah.
wanted to have. And I had to, I wouldn't say battle that necessarily as a negative, but I had to hold myself back and say, you're in a relationship. You can't do everything that, happens on television.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're an old fashioned gay one man kind of guy. And I have to not keep reminding myself of that, but as you had said, being with somebody for so long, seeing the different evolutions, and paths they have
Mm.
taken that I've taken as well. And as a
Yeah.
couple, and you continue to choose that person after all you've been through, there's something to that I don't think people understand.
Yeah.
And gays and people of the queer community and even trans men, I'm not trying to exclude anybody,
Yeah.
that live a different lifestyle, God bless. Just be safe
Yeah.
and live your truth, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. I think as well, having that experience to, I always say like it sort of happened with me when I hit my mid-20s and moved to Madrid. I felt like the urge to make up for lost time because in the UK, you can go clubbing at 18. I know in the US it's a few years later at 21,
Yeah.
but the UK,
Yeah.
like I felt like I'd lost 7 years and I had to make up for lost time in Madrid. So I
Yes.
was out Thursday, Friday, Saturday, even Sunday, they would have these afternoon parties, and then I'd be
Hmm.
teaching on a Monday, for example, rolling in
Yeah.
hungover, and I just was in this very fast lifestyle. Go to Berlin Pride or go to, Barcelona, go to wherever I could. I think because I didn't want to miss anything in a weird way.
Sure.
And I felt like I'd lost all this potential time. And I remember I was so caught up, so to speak, in the party culture that when I finally got into a relationship,
Yeah.
it ended up not working out because I went from that to kind of a relationship that wasn't the right one, which I think, it's happened to all of us at some point. And
Certainly
so
has. Yeah.
I went almost to like the sort of housewife mentality instead of who I really was. And nowadays I've reached a point where everything's a lot more balanced. So I can go out if
Yes.
I want, I can go on a date if I want, but I'm happy to stay in, relax, watch some trash TV or whatever it is.
Yes.
But I think,
There's nothing wrong with the housewife
yeah, for sure.
mentality. It's actually my preference these days,
Same.
going out
Yeah.
for drinks once in a while, all these years later. And doing laundry is fun. Going grocery shopping could, washing the
Yeah.
dishes, watching trash television like Southern Charm or Housewives
Yeah.
of whatever. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
You don't have to be ashamed, not you, but everybody,
Yeah, for
of
sure.
wanting to live the housewife lifestyle. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a peace of
Yeah.
mind. It really is.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's so true. And I think, there's a lot of I think a lot of us go through after we come out, after we can sort of start to live openly, when we're finding ourselves, there is that sometimes that rush almost of, oh, I might meet someone, I might meet my future partner if I go out, but if I stay in, I've got the weekend on my own, what am I gonna do? I went through that period when I was relatively new in Madrid, and I'd always had this idea in my head of finding the ideal partner. And then I realized there is no ideal partner. I have to find
No,
a good relationship with myself for, the right circle of friends and people to surround myself with. And so a lot of
that's
those friends that I have great memories with them from my 20s, but other than the sort of nostalgic memories, we maybe are in different places now, but I'll always have, that time that I can look back on. And it's always, great when I go to somewhere I used to go maybe 7, 8 years ago in Madrid and have that memory, but in a different place now, if you know what I mean.
sure. Well, because you've evolved,
Yeah.
you're less naive and you're living your truth as a completely different person. A different iteration of you has come forth.
Yeah.
So I completely understand that. Totally understand that. You can look back and say that was a great night out. That was a great time of going out 4 or 5 days out of the week,
Yeah.
But what did it really get you? And that's, I think, part of the evolution. That's why I think as queer men, we feel like we have to kind of fight that Peter Pan syndrome,
Yeah. So
or
true.
live it, and then
Yeah.
it eventually fizzles out. At least I can't speak for everyone, but that happened to me. And
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, I still like going out and drinking once in a
Yeah.
while and having a cigar, but I'd prefer to go to a lounge or a speakeasy or have a big
Yeah.
event for one of my books or my projects or my clients than going out till 3 in the morning, getting completely smashed.
Yeah.
That's not really fun anymore for me. So, but it's personal preference. So,
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure. Yeah, I think, it's always, I always say it's always great to have these memories, and they become very fond memories when we sort of look back. And I always think, even with the people that I may not be close with anymore, maybe one
sure.
day I'll bump into them in the street, we'll hug, catch up, and just go over
Yeah.
everything that's happened
Yeah.
in life, over the last few years. But I think, everyone's on their own journey when it comes to personal growth and finding their authentic selves.
They
And
have to
like I
be.
said before, we're
Yeah.
always peeling back the sort of onion and finding new parts
It
of
never
ourselves.
stops, Connor. It
Yeah,
never stops. It
it's so
never.
true.
And I will tell you this after having lived through many different things and grateful for those experiences,
Yeah,
the real ones will always come back and stick around.
it's so true. Yeah, yeah,
That's one, if I can have people walk away with one lesson today is the real ones will stick around no matter the ups, downs, the in-betweens, and the sideways.
yeah,
They will always stick by you no matter what. So
yeah,
there's that
100%.
lesson.
Yeah, I always say there's sort of friends in life that you might not see for years, and then as soon as you see them, it's like no time's passed at all.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Not to sound like the dad and all, but that's kind of where this
yeah,
conversation's going is
yeah,
I'm now like one of America's dads, all these
yeah.
years later. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing, with friendship, when you've grown up with and gone through shared experiences, whether they were hardships or memories that are just nostalgic, you can it doesn't matter where you are in life. At some point, if you reconnect, it's like no time's passed. And for you, how has it sort of been, sort of as you've navigated to the present and sort of started your own podcast and business, and
Yeah.
how has it sort of been for you now, sort of get into this present moment and your latest chapter, and as you go into the future as well, what are you sort of excited for? So I know it's turbulent times at the moment, but we've got to stay excited.
That's, you know what, you said it. End of conversation. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Uh, a lot. That's a loaded question, and that's a loaded answer. I don't know how much time you have, but the highlights. It's invigorating. It's scary as hell. Uh, Putting yourself out there, but for
Mm.
my path, having been through a transformative journey the past 2+ years with family and turmoil and also successes,
Yeah.
realizing and hearing from professionals I have to really make it on my own.
Yeah.
Now it's me versus me, which is incredibly worth it, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Having a podcast, being or trying to be, and then having it come to fruition, having complete strangers in which, they listen to my podcast or see
Yeah.
my social media post, saying
Yeah.
that I'm a voice of the community. I'm not a self-proclaimed anything. I've worked
Yeah.
for everything I've, done up to this point.
Yeah.
Not because I'm just a gay man, in his 40s, but because I've worked for it, but also because all signs have pointed to this moment in time.
Yeah.
With the state of America, full transparency, we can't skirt around this without having this, this kind of
Mm.
conversation.
Yeah.
Or not even alluding, just speaking what it is. We're in for
Mm.
very difficult times.
Yeah.
And I've had a difficult time this morning after the results have poured in, um,
Yeah.
to reflect, to not be scared. That's how we lose as a community.
Yeah.
We
So
are
true.
resilient.
Mm.
And even across the world, people listening and watching and maybe seeing, what's going to happen next. We're
Yeah.
not going to take anything laying down.
Yeah.
We have to be members of the community that speak up and speak
Yeah.
out.
So
And we
true.
need to help each other. And if
Yeah.
that means my business takes on more LGBTQIA plus clients,
Mm.
gosh darn it, I'm going to. If that
Yeah.
means having more members of the community on the podcast that are politicians and members of the community that have a
Yeah.
pull in our society, then that's what's going to have to happen.
Mm.
And I'm saying that with fear in my voice, and I'm
Mm.
shaking a little bit as we're speaking, but I'm
Yeah.
speaking my truth. And
Yeah.
that's how you know it needs to happen and what needs to break through next. So having been through my transformative journey for 2 years have really prepared me for this moment.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying I'm taking, as I had told you, in the green room before we recorded, full
Mm.
transparency, full stop. I'm not taking the woes of the country on my shoulders or the woes of the community on my
Mm.
shoulders.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be Joan of Arc here, even though God rest her soul. Maybe
Mm.
we can learn something from history, which we
Yeah.
should have, but we can change history. We can
Mm.
become better people because of these things that happen to us as a society,
Yeah.
and really try to change things for the better. And that's where I'm at with my business. That's where
Yeah.
I'm at with my podcast. That's where I'm at with my partnerships.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to stop. And that's because of everything I've been through, as we had talked about, my childhood, my
Yeah.
teens,
For
my
sure.
20s. Even today, I have a lot of LGBTQ clients, and that was not by accident.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to continue to be a voice, and that's where I'm going to continue to be a voice for the community and help where
Mm.
I can. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I think that's such an important message, for everyone, that's feeling a little bit, down today with the results as well. It's such an important message to keep that resilience and that strength. And when you've got so much passion behind something, we've overcome a lot of adversities in life, and we will continue to, because that's what we do as a community, and we keep powering through no matter what comes at us, and it just makes us
Correct.
stronger. No matter what setbacks, come our way, we just find a way. I always say we just do it, no matter
Yeah.
what's thrown at us.
We don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Connor, and those listening, we don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And that's not just in America, that's across the world. If we
Yeah.
don't stick together as a community, long gone are the days, or should be gone,
Mm.
the days where things in our community are transactional. And I think we spoke about
Yeah.
this maybe before we even
Yeah,
got
for
on.
sure.
If I reach out for help, for instance, or if somebody reaches out, for help for me, or wants to have a voice on the
Yeah.
podcast, or even as a client, and
Yeah.
they say, I need help, I'm not going to turn around on them and say, well, what can you do for me first?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not going to turn you away. I'm going to say, I didn't have this opportunity growing up or in my profession, or I've worked my tail off to get where I am today as a professional in the
Yeah.
community, of journalists and writers and authors and podcasters and businessmen. Because
Yeah.
gosh darn it, that took a lot of gumption to get to where I am today. And I'm proud of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's no way in hell that I'm going to turn somebody away and say, stop
Mm.
at the door. How much can you pay me? What can
Yeah.
you show me or do for me or do to me
Mm.
before I even think about helping you? That's never going to happen in my lifetime, at least as far as I'm breathing.
Yeah.
Speaking to you here today as a human being, first and foremost, I'm never going to turn members of anybody in our collective community away and ask what they can do for me first.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. Yeah,
Yeah, 100%. I think that mentality is so important. And, I always say it costs nothing, the price of kindness, and be opening up to people, and, the ability we have having, queer podcasts, but also, through LinkedIn to connect with people when someone reaches out. I think it's so important to try in, especially in the world of LinkedIn, that, sometimes a lot of things can feel transactional. A lot of posts can feel, the toxic positivity on there. Getting the
sure. Sure.
authenticity through and connecting with people from the community is so important. And, that's how we manage to build connections. And I think that's what makes us stronger as a community as well. Having these connections, we lean on each other. And people
Yeah,
as well, I always encourage people to just reach out, to just ask someone, whatever it is, whether they want to just have a platform to express their voice.
sure.
And yeah, just having that ability. And I think the great thing for us having, our podcast is we can reach so many people. And if it helps, even one person, then it's something that we're doing to give back.
Even just one person, if they're listening, if they
Yeah.
reach out to you, and this has happened to me recently, especially members of the queer Latin community have
Yeah.
come to me and asked for assistance and telling me that they're at these crossroads.
Yeah.
What can I do as a person of privilege? You have no choice but to help.
Yeah. So true.
That
Yeah.
you don't have a choice, and that's why we have these platforms. If we help one person feel better about themselves, or listen, to their truths, or
Yeah.
assist them in starting their businesses, whatever that means to get them to the next point in their, in their lifetime, we're obligated as members of, as the late Anne Rice had said, as writers, we're people of the page as authors
Yeah.
and writers, but we're members of the community, and we're people of the airwaves, and we don't
Yeah.
have a choice. Be kind and always help. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. It's so important. And what I always do as well now, before we finish, is I always think it's great to get from each person that comes on the podcast going forward a sort of quote that they live by. So is there a particular quote that you would say is very important to you that sort of summarizes how you approach your life? And is there any, I have so many that I sort of follow, but is there any specific quote to you that you sort of
yeah,
abide by or follow?
this is difficult to say because it comes from somebody that was a friend of mine,
Yeah.
but it still resonates in my life to this day. And I live
Yeah.
by this wholeheartedly, is that practice makes progress,
Yeah,
not
that's true.
perfect. If you're
Yeah.
not learning and growing and expanding and evolving, becoming less naive and reading and fighting every single day of your life,
Yeah.
then life is not worth living.
Yeah, it's so true.
And you're not evolving and you're not progressing in
Yeah.
this society in which you were born into. So
Yeah.
practice makes progress, not perfect. Yeah.
I think that is a really important one. It's such a great way to approach things. And so just before we wrap up, for people to find you as well, so where can people find your podcast on YouTube and any social links that you want to, pimp out for people to find you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, is easy. It's Joseph A. Federico / the Marketing Maven. I'm also known as that in the community. You can find me and my business and what I offer to members of the community on my website, as well as the podcast at 𝐓𝐻𝐸Dicomarketing.com. You can find me on all the airwaves under the Left of Straight Podcast Network, but for the Pride and Promotion podcast, we come out weekly. We're taking a bit of a hiatus for the holiday and everything going on here in the country before the new year starts very soon. But you can just find me. Namely, I'm really on Instagram, and that's just at Joseph A. Federico. And now TikTok, growing the business, is the Marketing Maven Mastermind. A lot more content's coming out on there as well. So
Awesome.
Feel free to follow, and I'll certainly help where I can.
That's awesome. So thank you so much for joining me today and opening up about your diary as well. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Truly thank you for being a voice for us as well. Very much so.
Thanks so much. And to everyone tuning in, thank you so much. And we'll be back with another episode next week. So thank you very much.